Hey everybody, John Wagnon here with DevCentral, and we are coming to you with another Whiteboard Wednesday. And today we're going to talk about SSL renegotiation. And what SSL renegotiation is imagine you have a client that's connected to a server. In fact, I'm going to just draw a couple little things here. You have a client who has connected to a server, and they've established the SSL or the TLS handshake. They're doing everything securely, but then for any number of reasons, and I'll give you those in a second, there needs to be a new SSL or TLS connection that needs to happen literally kind of in the midst of this current secure connection. And so one use case that's maybe a fairly common one is, let's say you're a user out there on maybe an online marketplace website, and you're kind of surfing around. And the marketplace website uses HTTPS, it uses SSL or TLS to secure that connection just to access their website. And so that initial handshake has happened, that initial TLS or SSL handshake has happened just for you to go out there and start looking around. But then, once you've done a little bit of shopping, you've added some things to your cart potentially, now you're ready to purchase something, and the site maybe says, hey, we need to renegotiate this session because we need to authenticate you as a user before you can actually make a purchase. And so in the midst of that secure transaction, now you need to establish a new secure transaction in order to authenticate you as a user. So that's one use case where there's some client authentication that may need to happen. Another one is potentially new encryption keys may be needed in the midst of a secure connection that's already established. Maybe a new hash algorithm is needed. So there's any number of reasons that this may need to happen. But again, what renegotiation is you have an initial client to server connection that is secure. I'll put a little lock on it right here. This is a bad lock, but actually that's not too bad. It's a pretty good lock. And so in the midst of that, the client needs to establish a new secure connection to the server. And I'll put that one like maybe a double lock or whatever. So this is a completely new TLS handshake has happened now. And so that is what this renegotiation is. And for the reasons that I just talked about, that's why this stuff is needed. And so there's one thing that you need to be aware of from a denial of service perspective. And that is that whenever a TLS handshake happens, it takes the server, I've seen statistics anywhere from 3 to maybe 10 times the processing power to process all those secure encryption keys and all that kind of stuff. It takes the server between 3 and 10 times the processing power as it does the client to make that TLS handshake happen. And so if the client were to send a server a client hello to initiate a TLS handshake, then the server is going to be like, okay, here we go. We're going to start this thing. It's going to take him 10 times, let's say up to 10 times as much power. Well, if you have this nefarious client, this bad guy client, you could start sending a bunch of server hellos out there, and now the server's completely bogged down with all these TLS handshake requests, and now it's just going to be chunking through a whole bunch of key and encryption key processing. And it's just going to bog the server down. So that's a denial of service attack against the server by using this renegotiation. And so actually, I don't know, a year or so ago, whatever it was, a lot of people were kind of alerted to that, and they said, hey, we need to not allow this renegotiation. And so SSL renegotiation was not enabled by default on some previous versions of the Big IP. Now in version 12.0, it is enabled by default. So if you don't want this to happen, you need to go in there and unenable it, and then it won't allow this renegotiation at all. But so like I said, it is enabled now. And so from a Big IP perspective, I'm going to put Big IP up here so we can talk about some of the settings on the Big IP. When you get into the Big IP, you set up an SSL profile, and that's where you configure all this stuff about renegotiation. And so the first thing is it's just going to say renegotiation, and you either check it or you don't. Like I said, it's checked by default. and certainly in version 12, and even a few versions prior to that. And then there's this thing called renegotiation period, and that's measured in seconds. And so you can either set that to a certain number of seconds, or you can set it to indefinite. Indefinite is the default, and basically that says how many seconds need to transpire, transpire before we require a new renegotiation for this SSL, transaction. So you can set that so that after a certain number of seconds, then it will request a new SSL handshake. Beyond the period, there's a size. So I'll put size up here, and that's in megabytes. This is also set to indefinite, but what that means is that after a certain number of megabytes that have been sent, to and from between the client and the server, then it will request a new SSL handshake. So the renegotiation would happen. That's also indefinite by default because you just want to allow as much as you need to before you require a new SSL renegotiation. And there's a couple other things that I won't get into every single detail on every single configuration, but the one thing that I really wanted to harp on this thing is there's a thing called max renegotiation. And so max renegotiation, of course, renegotiation takes forever to spell out because it's a really long word. But anyway, max renegotiation. The default in version 12.0 is 5. And what this is so I'll put version 12.0, and the number is 5 on max renegotiation. The thing that makes this significant, makes it kind of cool, is if you remember back to my discussion on the whole DOS attack thing, if a client were to send a server, some bad client were to send a server a bunch of TLS renegotiation requests, then the server would just sit there and chunk through them and they'd get bogged down. What this thing does is it says, hey, within a 1 minute period, how many renegotiation requests are we going to allow before we tell this client, hey, you need to knock it off, and we're not going to allow any more from you, Mr. Bad Guy, before the 1 minute period is over. And the default is 5. You can set it to whatever you want. So basically what 5 is saying here is that the client is only allowed to send 5 renegotiation requests to the server in a 1 minute period before he's going to get cut off. And so the cool thing about that is there's always been a max renegotiation number set on the big IP. But the thing that's cool about version 12, and this is new in version 12, is that you can set the max renegotiation number per SSL profile. So now you have a virtual server with an SSL profile assigned to it, that does certain traffic, and then you have another one over here with another SSL profile. You can set this max renegotiation number per SSL profile, and then that way you can assign it to whatever virtual server you need to. So anyway, so it's kind of a cool thing. So it basically just gives you more flexibility to withstand some of these DOS attacks, and it gives you, it's with the flexibility, one virtual server, one profile, you may want to allow more renegotiations, and another one you may want to really limit it down. And this allows you to do that again per profile. So this is this max renegotiation thing. It's a new feature in 12.0. So get out there, check it out. Configure those SSL profiles. And check out the renegotiation. It's a great time. It's a powerful feature, and it's something that we all need to know about. So hopefully you've learned a little something here today. And thanks for watching this Whiteboard Wednesday. We'll see you out there in the community.